Kiki is going to do the introductions. She's the chair of the Social Issues Committee of OCA. Leslie will present the OCA position. Helen from DAG will make a presentation. Amanda will speak briefly to the supportive housing proposal, which is emanating from Oxford. I suggest you mute yourselves so that if you have off meeting discussions or anything, it doesn't disturb us. There'll be somebody speaking from the CAN. I see it's Anna and is it Nadine here are there. We'll have some clarity of questions for about 10 minutes, then we'll open it to the floor. And the question that we will be addressing on the floor is, what should the OCA be doing? Let me just position the meeting. The meeting emanates based on concerns that that has been coming to our attention of various different natures. And that's why we have called the meeting, as is in the newsletter, towards a human response in the time of crisis. And because we need to consider what is the response in Observatory to the human need of the epidemic. So that is why on the agenda, we have people who are going to be talking about work that they're doing with the homeless and suggestions that they've got in this. And then that also includes finding out from active citizens and organizations what is happening. And then ultimately, how can we work together in caring for the poorer community most appropriately? And that's basically the notion of the meeting. I'm not going to speak much longer because there's quite an agenda and I don't want us to get stuck. So Kiki, do you want to do the welcome?
Hi, thanks so much, Sheila. Welcome everybody. I see there's so many wonderful people on this chat, and so I intended to go through everybody, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick out a few names. So we're going to do a process of introductions, and I'm going to start with the question, what is the quality that you would like in a best friend or a life partner? Somebody that you would spend your whole life with. So I'm just going to choose a few names and you're going to tell me the quality that you would like in a best friend or a life partner, somebody that you would spend your life with. Okay, so I'm going to ask Biddy. I see Biddy's chatting there. Biddy, can you hear me? Yes. Biddy sees us. Biddy, what is the quality you would like in a best? Yes. Well, what is the quality you would like in a best friend or a life partner? Somebody you would spend your whole life with?
Well, I just did 50-something years, but I think patience would be a good one to start off with. Okay. Did you hear that?
What did I do then? I don't know.
Yes, sorry, I think Wonderful. Okay, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I'm going to carry on. I'm going to choose another name. I'm going to choose Lorenzo. Lorenzo, what is the quality that you would like in a best friend or a life partner?
Honesty.
Wonderful. Malcolm Wallace, what is the quality you would like in a best friend or a life partner? Wonderful. I think I'm gonna just move on. I'm not sure if you can hear me. I know this data is.
Can you hear me now?
Resilience. That's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, that's wonderful. pleasure. And I see Joshua. Joshua, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Josh,
Oh, can you see?
pleasure.
Yeah.
What is a quality you would like in a best friend or a life?
Forgiveness. Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. That's beautiful. Forgiveness, honesty, resilience. You have great ones. I see someone here called Lisa. Lisa, are you with us? Awesome, Lisa. What is a quality that you would like in a best friend or a life partner?
While Lisa is
Lisa thinking, I guess there's so many.
no, while Lisa is thinking, I'm going to try and say mine again. Maybe you can hear me this time. I said patience.
Yeah, we did hear it, Biddy.
Okay, because you didn't put it in your list. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Betty. We got patience and we've got, wow, this is wonderful. And I think this is a great opportunity for everybody just to put in the chat what is a quality that they would like in a best friend or a life partner. Somebody you would spend your whole life with. I see Edwin said honesty, forgiveness, patience. I love the other answers that we got: connection, resilience, loving. So yes, you can go to, if it's your first time on Zoom, you can just go to the top right corner or wherever it is, it says more, and you'll see it says chat. And you can just pop in the chat any quality that you would like in a best friend, a life partner, or somebody that you would spend your life with. Wow, we've got willingness to be vulnerable, kindness, respect, integrity, a sense of humor, a good listener, compassion and understanding, authenticity. These are all wonderful. So now I just want you to close your eyes and take a deep breath in and out, and another deep breath in and out, and gently opening your eyes. I want you to imagine this question being asked all over the world to any community, any language, any culture. And this question in any language, I think we would get the same answers. I think if we asked our friends in Brazil, Tokyo, Guatemala, what would they like in a best friend or a life partner, all these wonderful words would come up. They would all come up: kindness, wit, honesty. And you know, as humans, we all want the same things. And these things are universal human values. So today, as we start this meeting, I would like to just remind us that human values are so important and they make a community. And there's an ancient proverb that says that if a baby does not cry for milk, the mother doesn't give it milk. So it's so important when a community comes together to talk and cry out for human rights, which are human values. And you know, sometimes when we are stressed out, our human values, like our energy levels, go low. Sometimes we're not a good listener, or maybe we're not having such a great sense of humor or integrity. And this is a very stressful time we're in this pandemic. But I just want us as a community to remember these amazing human values that make up our community. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining this meeting so we can build our conversation on this. Thank you, Sheila.
Thanks, Kitty. That was really lovely. Okay, let me welcome you all again, because now everybody, I'm sure there are 52 participants, so most people are in the room. So let me welcome you again. And I do need to just give an apology. Kirsty, who chairs the Architecture and Heritage, which has now been linked to the large developments, is studying, and she is at a lecture this evening. So she presented her apologies. Okay, I think let's move straight away to Leslie. Before we go, let me just say I'm delighted. It seems like the bandwidth seems to be pretty good all round, because there haven't been hiccups. Leslie, as you can see on the agenda, is going to talk about the OCA position, and all of the inputs are about 5 minutes long.
Okay, so the OCA has been involved with the CAN and other groups in providing support to vulnerable populations in Observatory, but it's not been without criticism. And this is really why we've called this meeting, because we know that COVID has created huge hardship for working people, for middle-class people, for everyone. And our response has been to support community initiatives to provide protection and food for people living hard, living on the street, homeless. But that has also led to some kind of social friction, social disruption in some places. And we've had to endure criticism of that. We had a meeting with one of the supermarkets in Observatory where it was said that the OCA was providing too much support, or Observatory members were providing too much support, and that was feeding crime. So we don't agree with that, but we wanted to have this meeting to have a frank discussion about how do we respond to human need in this context. This was put out in our newsletter, so I'll just run through it quickly. So we are living through extraordinary times, and we require sort of very unusual responses. We say that we believe we should be prioritizing compassion over self-interest, concern over coercion, and self-reflection rather than stereotyping. And we need to put aside prejudice and work for a society that is based on mutual respect. Homelessness, we understand, is a problem that is social. It's not a crime prevention problem. It's a very complex problem with many roots, and it requires a social solution. People who live on the streets include people of all sorts, people with mental illness, substance dependence, social difficulties, people who are just down on their luck. People are not criminals because they live on the street, but or in precarious accommodation. And we respond to the idea about criminality by saying, well, there is crime, and crime must be dealt with as crime, but homelessness is not a crime. And we shouldn't view homelessness as a crime, because that's not what we expect in a society based on human rights and dignity and respect. Where there is criminal behavior, that must be dealt with appropriately, but we shouldn't confuse the problem. We have criminal behavior in Observatory for many years, coming from people who don't live in precarious situations, who live in nice houses in Observatory, and that needs to be dealt with as crime. But we want to be able to respond to support people who are in vulnerable situations. We do have to respond in ways that try to bring all stakeholders together, and that's what the point of this meeting is. We've been criticized for saying that the feeding that we are supporting has created problems for businesses. We disagree. We've been criticized because it's perceived that some residents in Observatory are supporting legal action to oppose the city's efforts to execute their bylaws. And we disagree, because we don't believe bylaws should be used to prosecute poverty. We think that what we've done has ameliorated human suffering and reduced hardship, because people are living in desperate times. There's been massive job losses across the country, and it's no different in Cape Town. And there's really no grounds for claiming that the rights of homeless people and those under precarious accommodation should be dispensed with at this time through evictions or such like. And that's what the Observatory Civic Association believes, and that's why we've called this meeting, basically to get feedback, that we don't believe that law enforcement officials should be used to fine and confiscate property of people who have nothing to pay, but they should be deployed appropriately in helping to strengthen the COVID-19 response. So this is a public discussion, and we want to try and find collective solutions that meet a wide range of sectors in addressing this, and that's the initiative that we've started now. Thanks.
Thanks, Leslie. I'm sure some people have comments and questions, but you can hold them until later on in the meeting, because we'll do all of the inputs first. Helen, are you?
Thank you. Hi. So I'm Helen Rourke, and I've actually, in fact, asked my colleague Lorenzo Johnson, who is one of our project officers, to share DAG's position, in part not only because he's one of DAG's organizers, but also worked with one of the CIDs for many years. And so is able to straddle both worlds in terms of both what have been some of the kind of more brutal responses to homelessness, but in the last years had some real insights into what are some of the kind of much more dignified, human, and much more supportive ways in which to begin working with homeless and street people. So I'm going to ask him to share, in part because he has quite lived experiences. So Lorenzo, and if his bandwidth does go out, I can share his presentation with you, speaking in third person. So Lorenzo, are you available? Can I hand over to you?
Yes, thank you, Helen. Thank you for that, appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, everyone. And I thank you for the opportunity to present this evening on homelessness in Cape Town. My name is Lorenzo, as you heard from Helen. I joined DAG in 2019. It's okay if I put off my video just in case for bandwidth purposes.
Sure.
Yeah. I joined DAG in 2019 and previously worked in the CID sector dealing with homelessness on a daily basis, both on my on-the-ground experience and the year that I've had been working with DAG has shaped my understanding of both the real lived issues of homeless people and some of the incredible initiatives undertaken by the Cape Town NGOs working with homeless people. It has also shown me some of the scary behind the scenes of what homeless people have to contend with when a zero tolerance law enforcement approach is taken. The numbers across Cape Town are startling. There are currently about 6,175 homeless people in Cape Town, of which approximately 2,500 people are living in shelters. Homelessness has been a phenomenon in Cape Town for decades. The reasons for homelessness today and homelessness 30 years ago has changed tremendously, and over the last years has been made worse by increasing evictions, lack of affordable housing and shelters, coupled with limited programs for social economic reintegration. In the past 3 times or more, 3 years, more men than women were on the streets, you know. So increasingly now we are seeing more women and LGBTQT living on the streets, and life on the streets is also really hard and requires that people take care of each other. You know, especially amongst homelessness, I've seen this often and recently as well, especially with my family as well, living on the streets in Observatory. There are integrated networks like there are in any other home amongst the homeless community, except this one has no halls, you know. And before I resume, I have 2 questions I'd like for us to think about. Firstly, you know, and first question is, how do we define homelessness? Not everyone living on the streets are homeless. Some people do have families that could go to, but chooses to stay on the streets. So are they homeless, or are they considered to be street people? Which leads us to our next question of why, which is why do so many people choose to make the streets their home if they have homes or family they could go to? You know, it's easy for us on our side to judge one by their behavior, but have we ever taken the time to get to know the people we call homeless and to find out why they're on the streets and why are they homeless? In fact, the streets are what many homeless people call home. They have made the streets their own home, and how to survive, they've learned how to survive the streets as well. So let's look at reasons why we have increasing number of homeless people and see if we can differentiate between homelessness or homeless people and street people. So street people, structural or homeless people, structural causes, homelessness, housing shortages, unemployment causes homelessness, rapid urbanization then leads to gentrification or homelessness, evictions, no family no family members many times when people are released from prison for many years. And so this is what we shall call people homelessness, someone who doesn't have a place that they call home to go back to, or a family, or in that sense. Personal circumstances also influence the state of homelessness. Street people, however, have a home that they can go back to, but for a number of often personal reasons don't. This can allude to abuse and domestic violence, family problems, addictions. This could be drug or alcohol related, gang related issues where they are forced to move out of the communities they live in due to fearing their lives. So there is definitely a difference between the two, being homeless and being a street person. So what has been the response? Typically, I would say in the areas where I have worked in the past, there have been a zero tolerance approach to homeless and street people. In some instances, the CID would conduct law enforcement operations to remove people from the area. There are often cases of where these people would move to surrounding neighborhoods like Observatory. As for those who do not know, I worked in the Salt River Business Improvement District. So that precinct was my area of work. And so when we remove homeless or street people from those areas, the problem is not resolved. They'll maybe go to the shelter for a day or two if there are spaces in the shelters, but otherwise they go to the neighboring areas, which is either Observatory or Hoodstock. So there are, of course, a number of shelters in Cape Town, along with safe spaces, both in Kulenburg and in Belleville, but these are stretched with limited beds. These are lots of reasons why many homeless and street people choose not to use these facilities. In the last year, I had the opportunity to work closely with the Pickwick Transitional Housing Facility in Salt River, and I've joined the exceptional network known the Street People's Forum, and I've given support to Colisa Solutions. This has been so inspiring and has shown that a different approach to working with things which have proven success that eludes strong management and governance and intensive social development programs. In closing, I want to encourage the OCA and its members to adopt a humane approach to homelessness and street people in the neighborhood. My experience shows that a zero tolerance approach doesn't work. Working with the local CID and supporting NGOs back the local residents will go much further than police raids. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lorenzo, for that really illuminating and a peek into street people and homelessness. We're now moving to Amanda. And let me just say, you'll see that I'll disappear. I'm just going down the passage for a bathroom break while Amanda talks. Amanda, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Sheila, for that introduction. Yeah, and hi, Lorenzo. Yeah, so just from the opposite point of view, I've been in the role for 2 years, and I've been pretty fortunate to have a fairly good relationship with Colisa Streetscapes, and Jessie is on the call with us, and she'll talk a bit later. From an opposite point of view, our work with people living on the streets is twofold and has been for about the last 14 months. So up front, we do outreach and case management. So anybody living on the streets is able to access psychosocial support, referrals. We provide linkage officer services to clients. So a lot of our clients are very uncomfortable going to clinics, going to the hospital, going to the Department of Home Affairs, and our staff will accompany them on those visits. And we've had quite a lot of success in terms of being able to tackle the more difficult cases, the cases that, as Lorenzo has alluded to, people who are not going to go into traditional shelters So we've been working quite closely with the people living on the streets of Observatory for a considerable period of time. Our second aspect of work is that we offer a integrated approach driven by our relationship with Streetscapes, where people are able to access biopsychosocial support as well as sheltered work opportunities. And we started the program a year ago today, and at the moment we have 10 of the chronic long-term street-based folk working with us on this program. And that program has also shown some interesting behavior changes. Lorenzo has alluded to various improvement districts with various approaches. And in the OBSID, we don't take the approach of zero law enforcement above all. We've always had for as long as I've been here, we've had the approach of understanding that people don't have anywhere else to go. There is no point in chasing them up and down the railway line or chasing them out of different precincts into different areas. And as Lorenzo said, we've often in Observatory been the recipient of people coming from either PRASA-led operations up along the railway line, or from neighboring districts where people have actually gone in on that zero-based approach. The OBSID's always had a bit of an approach where we will ask for cooperation and try and find a way to work with people in the public spaces. And the main approach that we take is to try and ask people to try and minimize their impact on the public space. So getting up at a reasonable time, cleaning up around the area, packing their stuff safely away, and we're working on a daily basis trying to manage some of the issues that some residents and business owners in Observatory are unhappy about. And this puts us in a very difficult position because we're an easy target. So we receive all the complaints about people living on the street. We receive all the complaints about people's perceptions of whether they should be there or not. And we're often in the position where we will actually stand for the rights of those people to be there and to try and make people realize that if it's winter and it's pouring with rain, we are not going to ask people to move from under the Station Road Bridge. We're not necessarily going to ask people to move away from the sheltered areas of Observatory. And we're certainly not going to be asking people to break down their structures. So we've come quite a long way over a period of 2 years in terms of our approach. And a lot of it's thanks to Yesi and Streetscapes in terms of a harm reduction approach. So we've been able to build a really good relationship with TB HIV Care. We're a participant in their NSP program, which is needle syringe program. We offer safe needle exchange services. We also offer TB HIV Care access to our offices on a weekly basis. They use that for their outreach program. And we're really trying to work, and also done quite a bit of talking with Kiki over the 2 years, trying to work along the lines of understanding the issues that we're dealing with and understanding how we can better manage it so that everyone feels comfortable in the public space, regardless of the kind of structure that they call home. A natural extension of this approach and the harm reduction approach is the supportive housing program, which if you've been on the OBSID website or the Facebook page, or if you're a member of OBSID, you would have seen our announcements recently. And this is an extension of our integrated holistic approach. As Lorenzo has said earlier, and as Leslie hinted at the beginning, you can't tackle one issue regarding people living on the streets and expect that to solve. So if you suddenly offer someone access to a traditional shelter, that's not necessarily going to fix any of the other challenges or issues they may be facing. So I'd like to ask Yesi to just give you a very short overview in terms of how Streetscapes work, and then just in terms of how she's positioning the supportive housing model. And then obviously we'll take questions once the question and answer period opens. So thanks very much, and over to you, Yesi.
Thanks so much, Amanda, and hello everyone. Yeah, Streetscapes. So we actually started the organization because we wanted to understand better what drives homelessness and what drives crime and so-called antisocial behavior on our streets. In order for everybody to understand what we do, it's perhaps good to just go through the start of the organization or the program, because Kulisa, who is the mother body of Streetscapes, renders services at the courts. So social diversion programs that are the mandate of social development department are often outsourced to organizations like Kulisa and NICRO. Diversion is where social workers, instead of the criminal justice system, deals with offenses that are not seen as criminal but more social. So in city centre, in the Cape Town Community Court, where we offer services, from about 2014 onwards, our social workers were receiving between 200 and 300 homeless individuals per month. And the city was furious because in our 2-day process that we have within diversion, we didn't fix this issue. So we were called time and time again to explain why diversion doesn't work. And the way Kulisa normally works in the courts is we run short-term interventions and then refer to other organizations. And with this clientele, the type of homeless individuals that we used to see at the court, they were chronic homeless, they had been on the streets for years, if not decades, they had severe mental or addiction issues. And when we tried to refer them to other services, we found out there is no services for them. There are no shelters that take them. There are no rehabilitation clinic programs for this group. There is absolutely no developmental service available for them. So they ended up using clinics, hospitals, and the courts and the prisons. And this is, of course, flipping expensive as well. So Streetscapes was from beginning an attempt to find out what would work better. So we actually not driven by just moral impediments to reduce suffering. It is an important part, but it's more, how does one start addressing these issues? And that's where our opposition to law enforcement approach comes in. It doesn't work. If it worked, I'd be okay with it, but it doesn't work. It's more expensive to taxpayers. It's worse for the person's mental health. It makes addictions work. It makes everything actually worse. It really doesn't do anything. And even at best, when it works in an area, it pushes the crime, like Amanda and Lorenzo were saying, to another area. So having said all this, we kind of came up and tested based on constantly working with those living on the streets. What would they like? Why would they like it? And testing if it works. And work came along because that's what they said unanimously. They said, we don't want soup kitchens. We don't want social workers. We want a job. If I want to fix my life, I need to have resources and agency to do so. So we tested it for the first 6 months, gave people stipends through the city EPWP program, and lo and behold, it did work. A lot of people were able to fix their lives, move off the streets, but the second the stipends ended, they were back in that spot. So from 2015, the integrated approach includes work. It's supported work with a stipend that's very low. You get paid when you come, so don't come, that's okay. That's the sanction, is you don't get paid. And psychosocial support, because in all of our interviews, the true face of chronic homelessness is not a kind of character flaw or a bad person. It's normally a traumatized child whose needs have never been addressed. So 69% of our clients have experienced more than 2 significant childhood traumas. Now, this is huge because we know that those are the drivers for later mental health issues, addiction issues. So when we see people using heroin, for instance, we've learned that it's not a problem. It's actually the person's attempt to find solutions to their problems, and these feelings of being overwhelmed, being depressed, feeling like their lives are actually threatened. So it's a much more complex mental health issue than a lack of housing or just deviant behavior. So the difficulty is that we learned that unless, though, you find spaces for people to live and find a housing program, it's very difficult for those individuals to deal with their issues. So we had to, from last year, include, or 2018, we started our first housing site, providing supportive housing programs, because the shelters don't tend to the needs of our clientele for various reasons. One of them is that our clients, they want agency, like all of us do. Those are temporary solutions for temporary housing needs. Those are not homes. None of us would want to live in a hospital or in an institution. So through our supportive housing programs, we try and create spaces that allow you to address the chaos in one's lives, the mental health needs, as well as de-learn some of the habits that have ingrained quite deeply and learn newer ones in a way that's developmental, but yet has clear boundaries. And yet call it a home, a house where you are not a passive recipient of services, but well, it's your home. It's a space where you can be and where you can feel safe. So we've seen in our 5 years of existence, huge change. In the beginning, the kind of message that we were receiving from the city and some of the SIDS was that we are the reason that homelessness exists. Because of our services, we draw people into the areas. And I hear a little bit of those kinds of criticisms that are coming from the work of the civics now in OBS, that because you're doing the good things, you're somehow being the problem. That sounded like what we heard a lot in the beginning. As we've come along, it's the SIDS that have become our greatest supporters, because at the end of the day, they are the ones that have to deal with this, and they have an impossible role because it's not issues that are created locally. They've been created over a long period of time and in an impossible environment where we don't have work and where we don't have housing options and where mental health services are severely lacking. So
Jessie, can you start to round up a little?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, the housing programs that we're starting in OBS, they're based on the same principles as what we've got in the other two sites. It's the supportive housing with clear rules, which would be, for instance, it's a harm reduction model. You can use drugs while you are part of streetscapes, but you can't use in the house. You cannot commit violent acts. You have to pay rent as a portion from the stipend that you earn. And you need to be a streetscapes beneficiary because we want to have these housing options for that particular group and ensure that they get all the other services that they need. In OBS, the idea is to attract homeless people from the OBS community, but that means we need work for them in the area and funding as well. So let me finish there because I could ramble forever, and thanks, Sheila, for stopping me.
I noticed that, but thank you, Jessie. It was most interesting and really very valuable to position our discussions. Amanda, do you want to say anything further?
No, I'm good for now, unless we'll take questions later if they're
okay, great.
More.
Thanks, eh? Okay, now is it now you, Anna, or Nadine?
Yeah, thank you. I'll start and Nadine will take over. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us.
Anna, can you also,
can
you just also give us a quick description of the can?
Yes, I will.
Not everybody knows this. Thanks.
Yes, exactly. I prepared that. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know that that's needed. So the CAN is a community action network, and it emerged sometime in March 2020 as a kind of collective of activists and organizers around Cape Town realized that there was going to be a need for a community response to the COVID pandemic and the lockdown of that. And so what has mushroomed into existence across the city of Cape Town, and in fact now further in like the Eastern Cape and in Gauteng, are a whole lot of community-based grassroots responses to COVID pandemic. And what this looks like in South Africa, in a very kind of unequal country where people are vulnerable to things like a lockdown, is sourcing food, making sure everyone has access to water, as well as kind of some more actions directly related to COVID. So within Observatory, I think a large part of the CAN work has been about building a relationship between residents who are members of the CAN and people who are living on the street, but also amongst residents within Observatory. So there's also a network of people who can offer support when a resident is either struggling to get food because of loss of livelihood, or if they are in isolation and need someone to shop for them. So there's a lot of different tentacles of the Observatory CAN, and I think maybe one of the strengths is that it's been a very rapid organization of kind of local community members. Maybe one of the weaknesses is that it's quite scattered and sometimes it's difficult to sort of pin it down. And so Nadine and I are here today And it's difficult to say that we represent the CAN because we definitely do not. But we are two people who have been active specifically within the activities together with the people who street-based folk near the common or on the village green. And so that's kind of the point from which we're talking today. And I know there's other CAN members at this meeting, so hopefully they can fill in other gaps that we aren't able to speak to. So maybe just to name two discomforts briefly. The one is, this is something we've been struggling with as the CAN as well. Like, we are in a meeting here speaking about people who are speaking about people and thinking about decisions that affect their lives. Oh, sorry, Dorothy, I hear. Yeah. So it's a concern that we are talking, we are discussing a concern and we don't have those people present here. So that's just something we feel uncomfortable about. And then, yeah, just to note that as the CAN is very multiple. So yeah, we're speaking in this particular, from this particular perspective. So Nadine is going to speak a little bit about the activities that we've been involved in.
Thanks. Just before you come in, Nadine, I should have mentioned earlier that we're recording this meeting. There are a number of people who weren't able to be here and they've asked for the recording. So that's why you can see in the top left-hand corner, there's that red button and it says recording. Thanks, Nadine.
Sheila, noted. Just from my side, from the CAN's perspective, we just wanted to give everyone kind of an idea of what the OBS CAN has done over the course of the last couple of months. We've been focused, myself and Anna and Lauren, who's joined us as well, have been focused largely on the food distribution. It was coordinated by Kiki to start off with, and it has since evolved into a way more sustainable community kitchen model. We cook breakfast 7 days a week at the Armchair Theatre on Lower Main Road. We also provide 4 p.m. meals 7 days a week. We've been doing a clothing drive. We've been involved with a clothing drive. We've been distributing masks and having conversations around the pandemic with people at the Green. There's been a blanket drive, there's monthly soap distribution, and we've been learning a lot from other CANs and other neighborhood organizations to kind of, you know, find out what the best way is to approach the food insecurity as a result of COVID and food insecurity as a whole. We are collaborating with Africa 70, which is a delivery service whereby they provide meals for free to our neighbors at the common, and you are able to order food for delivery to your home, which pays for the ingredients to provide the meals for our people at the common. We have a lovely group of people that are involved in this community kitchen. And if anyone here is after the meeting interested to get involved with that, we would love to have you on board. I think it's also just important to just reiterate what Anna said about us finding it difficult to speak on behalf of the people or speak about the people sleeping rough and that aren't able to be here. We focus largely on trying to see people and not homeless people. We have a collaborative relationship with the people at the Green generally. They help us to cook breakfast. We trying to create a participatory democracy. We have questions like how much cinnamon do we add to the oats? Who makes the best maize? So it's really lovely to have people involved from the vulnerable community instead of just treating them or making them feel as if they are being serviced and they don't have a role in the improvement of their quality of life. I just want to, that's basically what I've got to say. I'd like to hand over back to Anna. Thank you all for the forum.
Thanks, Nadine. Yeah, just to add, 2 more points onto kind of our sort of thinking about what we're doing. I think, you know, as we go, we are constantly like reflecting and thinking about how we can do things better, how we can incorporate the feedback that we get from people who are living on the green, and slowly build to something that is kind of more truly collaborative than it is at the moment. And I think maybe just as a kind of in the spirit of what this meeting is, I think, you know, we've had to think quite a lot about it over the last month as the food kind of team has changed its form from a kind of more reactive response to a more proactive response. We did not believe that our attempts to kind of build community-based structures of care are a cause of increased criminal activity. And so I guess, you know, we live in South Africa, which is a country that is very plagued by violence, and it's an element that has always been around, and it's an effect of a much more significant problem that actually relates to the absence of structures of care, like we're hearing from Streetscapes and Observatory. So we understand the concerns, but based on our experience over the last few months, over building relationships, over learning very rapidly ourselves about ourselves in relation to other people who are living much more vulnerably than we are, we have found routes towards solutions. I don't want to say we found solutions necessarily, but by engaging directly within, and we encourage others to join us. So thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Anna. We're now moving to 10 minutes, questions of clarity. And I'm going to time this so that we don't overstretch this and we can move on to discussion. And just for people to know that Edwin is actually assisting with checking people who are indicating with their hands because there's so many participants. Okay, I can see Kevin's hand. So you start off, Kevin.
Okay.
And
then... thank you so much for the opportunity. I wanted to ask about the people who are staying opposite KFC, so in the settlement. I wanted to ask if that's part of the group that's being considered for the housing project. Thanks.
Okay, hi Kevin, Amanda from Obsid here. So our Obsid's boundaries are set, so we're not able to put infrastructure and costs outside of our boundaries. So for example, you'll see that we put a hand washing station near KFC. We weren't able to put it near the Arcadia site because it's outside of the Obsid boundaries. However, we do offer services to that community, and if there are people in that community who are wanting, as Jessie has said, who are keen to join the Streetscapes program and be participants in the Streetscapes program, they are most welcome to come to us. We are supporting some people in the Arcadia group at the moment, people who've lived there temporarily and moved on. Some of them are on OST, which is being supported by the Obsid with our partnership with TB HIV Care.
thanks, Amanda. Any further questions?
Thank you.
Miles, October, and then Iris. Yeah, Kevin, if you can just take your hand down.
Thank you. My question is to Lorenzo. You've given us some statistics on numbers of homeless people. You said about 6,100 living on the streets, and then about 2,000 people in shelters. I just wanted to find out where those statistics come from, or the source of those numbers. And then second question, just an opinion. Sorry, I'm from Sea Point, Fresno Bantry Bay Ratepayers Association. We have a huge problem with, obviously, homeless people and street people in our area as well.
Thanks for
and
introducing yourself.
we're trying to come up with solutions. So that's the reason for me joining your session, to kind of learn and see what other communities are doing. Second question, just wanted to find out whether or not you feel that there's enough shelter space in Cape Town, because it's been said on many occasions that there is enough shelter space for the amount of people living on the streets.
Hello. Hi, thank you. So quickly, if I could answer your questions. I got it from an article, the August, which is the city of Cape Town, basically stats that was put out there on the article. I will forward to you shortly onto the chat so that you could have a read through it. And then most definitely, there are not enough shelter spaces for all the homeless people on the streets of Cape Town. Working in Stickland Improvement District a few years ago, 2017, what I found was, I mean, when I found people that wanted to get off the streets, we would contact social development, we would have operations, we would do all the necessary things, and now social development, Peter Cookson and his team have to now phone every single shelter you can possibly think of to try and find a space for 1 or 2 individuals that want to get off the streets. So definitely not. It was really tough. It wasn't easy finding a space. And sometimes you would find a space, but then it's in Paul. Now the person says, well, I'm living in Cape Town. I'm living in this area. What am I going to do in Paul? You know, and especially with the rules and the strictness, because what the CID would do, we would cover about 2 weeks payment of your shelter living to give you some, and help you probably make an ID so that you can look for work in that time period, you know. But many a times it's unsuccessful if you do find a space for them finding a job, and you'll see them about a few weeks later back on the streets again. So to answer your question very shortly, no, there's not enough space. And call Peter Cookson, I'll give you his number and you can ask him. There's not enough space.
Thanks, Lorenzo. Before we go to Iris and Graham, there's some questions for OPSID that have been put on the group chat. The question is, was a census done at the beginning of lockdown to record the number of people living in different areas of Observatory? And a follow-up question, how many people are coming into Observatory on a daily basis that do not sleep in the area but come in daily? Do we have this information? So Amanda, that question would be for you. Do you want to make a note of those questions, Amanda? And let's just hear the other inputs for the time being. Well, that
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah.
Thanks. Iris? Where is Iris here?
Oops,
I
sorry.
see this.
Hi,
Okay.
I was failing to unmute myself. So my question, or actually questions, is for Jessie and Amanda regarding the housing program project. So it's quite a few questions regarding timelines with the project. When are you planning on starting the project? What will be your recruitment and selection process? How long are people going to be in? So is there like a duration of lease or duration of their contracts? How many spots are going to open? Okay, I'm going to stop here. It's too many questions already. Thanks.
Amanda,
yeah.
can you just hold your questions in case there are others? And so then you can do a whole response from OPSID about the various questions. Will that be okay?
Sure, no problem.
Okay. Graham Falcon.
Hi, everybody. This is just a networking question. I'm part of the Corona Warriors group in OBS. I just wondering, is there a connection between that group and the CAN? Are people in touch with each other? Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, that's a CAN question. Are there any other questions before we go to the responses? Because I don't see other hands. nor other questions on the chat. All right, well then that's going to be the end of our questions of clarity, and after the responses from the CAN and OPSID, we'll move to discussion. Okay. Anna, do you want to go first because you've got a short question?
Yeah. So I've not heard of the Corona Warriors. I feel very sad about that, but no. And I checked in with some of my teammates. They haven't heard, but I'd love to know more. Thank you.
Okay. Nadine, have you got anything further to say about the connection between the CAN and the Corona Warriors? Is it just not there? Okay. All right. Well, Amanda, do you want to take the answer? Yeah, Graham.
Sorry, can I just explain? Corona Warriors is a group of about 60 people, and it used to be the Water Warriors group. Remember when we had the water crisis a couple of years back? That's when the group started, and when the coronavirus started, it sort of converted itself to Corona Warriors. But and it's a big group of people, so I just think it makes a lot of sense for there to be some connection between the two, if there isn't one.
Well, can I suggest that the two of you on the chat group swap contact details and you can take it further?
Absolutely, okay. No problem.
Great. Thanks, Graham. Amanda, your responses.
Okay, so to Carolyn's questions about census and numbers, we run a fairly up-to-date database of people that are living in Observatory. So we have a fairly good idea of who's living in Observatory and how long they've been in Observatory for. What we haven't done is we haven't had a database of the number of day walkers and people coming in. But the CAN and ourselves can attest to the fact that the numbers that you find waiting for the meal service in the evening are far higher than what you find when you go out in the mornings, which is when people have obviously overnighted in Observatory. So best guess for us, and again, please remember that I'm speaking primarily about the OPSID boundaries, which excludes people living on the Liesbeek, it excludes people living at Arcadia, and it also, we understand the numbers at the circus site, but in terms of the people that we've been tracking from a meal service point of view, we're mainly focusing on the railway line, as well as the people living on and around the village green. The numbers go up from about 35 to 45 to about 60 to 70. And in late May, the numbers were going higher than that. And obviously Kiki, Nadine, Anna, and Lauren were involved with the meal service along with OPSID at the time. And then OPSID withdrew towards the beginning of June. So we've definitely seen an increase in the number of people moving through the area. And obviously from a public safety point of view, our guys report on a public safety point of view in terms of unusual foot traffic. When we've had curfews, it's obviously easier to document foot traffic. There are times where, and in late May, we were recording foot traffic moving through the area from sort of 6 in the morning till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So we have a good idea of the numbers, but in terms of the actual breakdown, the demographics, we didn't necessarily record that, because at the time the CAN were providing meals for between 70 and 80 people at a time. So we weren't struggling to handle the numbers, but from a long-term resident in Observatory or someone who's now living in Observatory versus people walking in from other areas, we reckon we were seeing, in my view, probably 35 to 40 people additional a day at the peak of the lockdown. So sort of level 5, level 4. It's definitely tapered off now, obviously, as various areas have opened up and people are able to access support. For example, there's 2 meals a day being served in Shelley Street in Salt River. So that's in terms of that question. In terms of the housing, in terms of Iris's questions, so our selection criteria, as Jessie explained, is participation in the Streetscapes program. So the process that OPSID runs is we do outreach. We are available for people who are wanting to come and talk to our social auxiliary worker. She will do baseline profiling, biopsychosocials, and understand what the individual is actually hoping for from the appointment or from the series of appointments. Sometimes it's transactional, it's very simple in terms of getting a replacement ID so they can access their SASSA grant. Other times it's more complex than that. There will be people who come through those interviews who then have expressed an interest in being part of a program. And they are then put forward for consideration for inclusion in the Streetscapes program. Now, the Streetscapes program runs from 8:30 to 3:30, Monday to Friday. We provide breakfast and a hot drink at the opposite offices in the morning. There's then an hour and a half of a group session. They then are out as a team doing various activities in Observatory between 10 and 2. They then have another break. And then there's a wrap-up session in the afternoon, and that's not for everyone. And we fully appreciate that, and that's what we've learned from Yessie and from her team. So if people are interested in being part of the Streetscapes program, they are then, the supportive housing program is another element of that. So the sort of selection criteria will be guided by Yessie and her team in terms of participation in the Streetscapes program. We currently have 10 people registered on the program. OBSID funds their stipends. So we are funding the individual cost of each person on that program. We have space for 2 more in terms of our funding, and then that's why we put out calls to the community to sponsor additional people. We expect to, as funding grows, there's been quite a bit of interest so far, we'll be able to offer placement on the program to additional people on additional work sites. So we're exploring issues around recycling and around the production of various things that can be used through recycling. We're exploring the option of trying to find space for some kind of urban garden and observatory. And that is the approach is very much to become part of the Streetscapes family, and the Streetscapes family are able to offer you placement in a house. In terms of numbers, at the moment, our pilot project, we're aiming at no more than 20. The house can comfortably take far more than that, but obviously with COVID at the moment and with intake protocols, we're going to be looking at 20. We probably won't take it higher than 30 people once COVID is manageable. We want to be sure that we're not squeezing too many people in the room. And that we have the ability to spread out. So the facility that we've got's got 7 different size rooms. There's room for couples. There's rooms for smaller groups, and then the rooms for bigger groups. I'm thinking I've answered all your questions.
Yeah, there's one last question that's not directed at OPSID necessarily. It's the last question, and then we'll have about 20 minutes for general discussion, which is a bit short. Is there anyone at the meeting who has a business in Observatory? Because it might be interesting to hear from a business perspective. Okay, I think I'm going to open for discussion. If there is somebody that has a business, just join in the discussion. Okay.
I've got a business in Observatory. I'm running Ferdinando's Pizza. It's a pizzeria. The reason I started working on the OCA and working on the can and started the Pasta Kitchen, which I indicated we feed 60 people every Wednesday from Observatory, is because I was running my business and I was made aware of the need of food, because we had many homeless coming to our door at the end of the night. And I'm previously from the central CBD area, and I realized that there wasn't many feeding programs in the evenings running regularly. That's why we started the Pasta Kitchen, to get to know our community. I understand that obviously I'm maybe one of the few business owners that took this action, but I think it's important that we realize that, you know, we can't just be an island in our community, in our business. You know, often before we started working with the homeless community, I used to say that I feel like I'm in an airport in Observatory, because, you know, I just see people coming and going, but I'm neither coming or going. I'm just in my business. Whereas now that working with the community, working with the homeless, I feel that we are making a difference. And, you know, I understand that there are issues. I was hoping that there would be some more business owners on this conversation so that we could actually work together in solving some of the issues where I understand that as a business owner, the aesthetic look of homelessness is something that isn't welcomed, but we must understand that this is a time of deep suffering for our country, and if the look might be terrible, but the real feel, I know our business is highly supported by people that know that we have a community feeding project, that know that we are a drop-off point for food, and I feel that we get a lot of success and grace from the fact that we work with the homeless and our community.
Okay, you'll see there's a question from Alex that he put through, which I'm not sure who it is, who Jalamayer 001 is, but he answered it. It was a question about foot traffic and also who OPSIT shares data with and whether this data's been shared on the buzzer. So maybe Jalamayer, you can answer those questions out loud because others might want to hear it.
Hi, just to clarify, I just wanted to know what unusual foot traffic is.
Sorry, whoever's talking is very soft. Alex, was it you talking?
Yes, it was me talking, but I think my, can you hear me now?
I think talk closer to the microphone of whatever you've got.
Okay,
That's better.
Want to know what unusual foot traffic is, because obviously there's a definition for that and a way of measuring that, and certain bias in that. And then the opposite part of the discussion was very informative, and it cut off for a bit, but it was mentioned that OPSIT has a database of residents. So, for example, like, am I on that database? And then my third question is OPSIT sharing this data with any private companies? Because a new app called Buzzer has recently been launched, and there was a discussion on the lower WhatsApp group about the app sharing data with a foreign company. So yeah, just from a data perspective, and then also the collection of data itself also has a definition on this potential bias, like unusual foot traffic. So those two questions.
Okay. OPSIT want to answer that as much as you'd like to, although this isn't really actually what the meeting's about. That should be directly more of an OPSIT meeting, but OPSIT might want to just give a very quick answer.
Yeah, I can give a quick answer, but Alex, I would suggest you contact me at the OPSIT office. So number one, we said we had a database of those people living on the streets. So anybody who accesses our services, we record basic information, which is kept inside the OPSIT office and isn't shared. That's point number one. Point number two, in terms of other information that we gather, we don't share it with any external parties. You might have seen recently about Vumacam, Vumatel, that they make their information commercially available. We don't. We don't share it with insurance companies. It's an internal information gathering only. And point number three, in terms of unusual foot traffic, so we have 3 vehicles out and between 3 and 6 foot patrollers out in the neighborhood 24/7, 365. So our guys are quite used to people living on the streets. They know where people call, which areas people call home. They know, in many cases, they certainly know faces, but they also know names. And what we record as unusual foot traffic is when we start finding people from other areas walking through the neighborhood and not on the commercial routes, they are not on the transport routes, and walking through areas at different times. So from our point of view, we see different patterns of foot traffic. We've seen it through the lockdown and through COVID lockdown, and it's noteworthy for us in terms of how we deploy our vehicles and how we interact with the foot traffic that is going through the area on a 24-hour basis.
All right, let me just say that there was a question on the chat group which I answered directly. It's around the new proposed electoral boundaries and what it means for OBSID. However, I'm not, my sense is that we can take that question if there's nothing else about the actual focus on which is the purpose of the meeting. Because we still have 15 minutes. If anyone wants to raise anything more or make further comments. Oh, so it looks as though we've come to the end of the meeting. That question on the chat group about the boundaries, I've looked at the Gazette, and it seems to me that there isn't a major difference in the size of the ward at all. There was part of a voting booth in Mowbray, and further into Mowbray, seems to have disappeared, and it seems like what will be added on is the Salt River Hall, which apparently is a very small voting area. So I don't think there's a major change to Observatory per se. But if other people know differently, you can comment. Okay. Well, it seems like...
Leslie's hand is raised, please.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Edwin. Leslie.
So just on that point, I'll just read what Jody wrote. And Jody's made the point that OBSID boundaries are not related to ward boundaries, and OBSID boundaries will not be affected by the demarcation. So what I wanted to say about the purpose of our meeting was just to get a sense if the Observatory community more broadly, how it felt about the way we were approaching the challenges of people on the street and homelessness. And if I'm hearing correctly, we haven't heard a kind of a response that says we're doing things wrong. We might be able to do things better. And I think there's been quite a lot of interest and support in the model of supportive housing that Jesse and OBSID have talked about, and the work of the CANs and bringing people together. So I'm hoping that we can come out of this meeting feeling like we are on a sort of a right track. We can do things better, and we'd like to hear, but we're not on the wrong path. So I'm just putting that out there so we can get a sort of temperature check from the meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Desi. Before you respond, there has been a comment on the chat which asked about the plan for people who are not going to go into the new house that's proposed, and whether it would be an idea to provide an early morning food pack for local people living on the street, and then a limited meal at the end of the day on some days of the week. So that's just been added to the chat, so we'll take that into. Okay. Would people like to respond to Leslie's comments?
Sheila, I just saw on the chat that there was an idea from Carolyn, I think, about a early morning food pack for local people living on our street.
Sure.
I just want to clarify that we have an amazing food distribution program going on. Nadine and Anna did outline that on the village green there is provisions of breakfast and late lunch every day. But besides that, we are feeding up to 113 people in Observatory with food parcels, with the money that has been raised through the COVID-19 OBSCAN homeless food drive. And those are going to, we've got Kulikile on this call that is representing of the Singabalapa. He is a connection that he just, sent a message to say that they would need assistance. And there's various committees also at the WAC and on the Lisbeck 7. And we must remember that we unfortunately, I have tried today so desperately to get so many of these people on the call by providing data and etc. But it's a difficulty. So I would really like to call to the people on this conversation to remember that you can also be the voice for your neighbor, even if they aren't in a house but on the street. And if you do see somebody in need, to refer them to either myself, I'm heading the social issues portfolio for the OCA, and then they can be put on our list to provide food parcels, and we can also divert to the closest safest place to get a meal, because we have a lot of contacts and networks.
Thanks, Kiki. There's been another message on the chat group whether we can refer people to the green feeding scheme, because there are new people, including from as far as Ghana, who are not begging, but they need food. So your response, Kiki, is that they can join the green.
Yes, for now, we would like, if you have people that, you know, the village green is catered for, the meals are catered for specifically for the number of people living on the village green. We would rather prefer to start a new site. If for example, it is a community or a household or a family that is needing help, we would prefer to feed them on site closer to their home. The village green meals is specifically for those that are living on the village green. We are feeding everybody on their own site. So if there is a need, please can you, I'll put the email on the chat. You could email us.
Okay. Well, it seems like that we've come to the end of the meeting with 9 minutes to spare. Well done. I think that this is the beginning of a lot more consultation that the civic wants to have with the people who are members and other people who are living in Observatory, because there will be other pressing issues that come up. But it's been really gratifying and good to see the extent of the work that's being done and the extent of the care that is being that is being meted out within Observatory to the people who are homeless or living on the street. So it remains for me, if there's no one else who has anything pressing to say, to thank you all for coming, and we'll see you again at the next consultation, whatever the topic of that will be.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. It is on the closing. I just want to close with the Africa Peace Prayer.
Oh,
and
sorry.
Whoever's listening, I would just like to say thank you for being in this conversation with peace in our hearts and minds. Let us bless the whole continent. God bless Africa. May everyone in Africa be happy and healthy. May the nature be protected and all the animals be safe. May peace and prosperity come to everyone on this beautiful continent. Thank you so much, everybody.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye then.
Bye-bye.